Sarah's hands trembled as she applied the last coat of mascara, her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror revealing eyes that had seen too much disappointment. At 32, she'd endured enough cruel jokes to recognize the warning signs, but desperation had a way of making even the wisest hearts hope against hope. Her coworkers' giggles echoed in her memory as they'd set up this perfect match with Marcus Thompson, the billionaire CEO whose company had just acquired theirs. She knew what she was, the quiet bookkeeper with second-hand clothes and a kind heart that everyone seemed to take for granted. But tonight, she decided to believe, just once more, that maybe someone could see past the surface. The restaurant's golden lights cast long shadows across the polished floors as Sarah entered Romano's, her worn heels clicking against marble that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She'd chosen her best dress, a simple navy piece she'd found at a thrift store, and carefully mended her and held her breath as she approached the hostess stand. The woman's practiced smile faltered slightly as she took in Sarah's appearance, clearly expecting someone more glamorous for a table reserved under the Thompson name. "I'm here to meet Marcus Thompson," Sarah said softly, her voice barely audible over the restaurant's ambient chatter. The hostess led her to a corner table where a man sat with his back to her, his broad shoulders filling out an expensive suit. Sarah's stomach churned as she approached, imagining his reaction when he turned around. How long would it take for his face to fall? How quickly would he make his excuses and leave? But when Marcus Thompson turned to face her, something unexpected happened. His eyes, a deep brown and kinda, didn't scan her appearance with disappointment or judgment. Instead, they met hers with genuine warmth, and a slow smile spread across his features. "Sarah?" he asked, rising from his chair with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to boardrooms but retaining an approachable charm. "I'm Marcus. It's wonderful to meet you." He pulled out her chair with such natural courtesy that Sarah found herself momentarily speechless. This wasn't the reaction she'd prepared for. Where was the barely concealed disappointment? The quick glance at his phone to fabricate an emergency exit. "Thank you," she managed, settling into the chair as Marcus returned to his seat. Up close, she could see the laugh lines around his eyes and the way his expensive suit couldn't quite hide the exhaustion that seemed to weigh on his shoulders. "I have to confess something," Marcus said, his fingers drumming nervously against the white tablecloth. "I almost didn't come tonight." Sarah's heart sank. Here it was, the gentle letdown, delivered with enough kindness to assuage his conscience. "I understand," she began, already reaching for her purse. "Really, it's fine here." "No, wait." His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of hers. "You don't understand. I almost didn't come because I've been living like a hermit for the past 3 years. Ever since my wife died, I've thrown myself into work, into taking care of my daughter Emma, into anything that would keep me from having to connect with another person." The raw honesty in his voice stopped Sarah cold. This wasn't what she'd expected from the ruthless CEO her coworkers had whispered about. "Your colleagues at Meridian Marketing," Marcus continued, "they painted quite a picture of you. Dedicated, hardworking, the kind of person who stays late to help others finish their projects even when her own work is done." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "They told you that?" "Among other things." Marcus's smile turned dry. "They also seemed to think it would be hilarious to set up the mouse from accounting with the ice-cold CEO. I believe those were the exact words I overheard when I stopped by your office last week." The blood drained from Sarah's face. He'd heard them. He knew this was meant to be a joke, a cruel setup designed to humiliate them both. "I should go," she whispered, starting to rise. "Please don't." The quiet desperation in his voice made her freeze. "Do you know what made me decide to come tonight anyway?" Sarah shook her head, unable to find her voice. "I watched you that day. After I heard their conversation, I saw you comfort Jenny Morrison when she was crying about her divorce. I saw you cover for Tom Walsh when he came in late again, and I watched you share your lunch with the new intern who'd forgotten his wallet." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "They called you a mouse, but all I saw was someone with the biggest heart in that entire building." The waiter appeared to take their order, but Sarah barely heard the words exchanged. Her mind was reeling, trying to process this completely unexpected turn of events. "I have a confession too," she said once. They were alone again. "I knew it was probably a joke. I've been the punchline before. But I came anyway because sometimes you have to hope that maybe, just maybe, someone will see you differently." Marcus nodded slowly. "My daughter Emma is 8 years old, and she asks me every day when I'm going to find someone to love again. She says Mommy would want me to be happy. She sounds wise for 8. She gets that from her mother." Marcus's smile was tinged with both sadness and fondness, but maybe also a little from spending too much time around boardrooms. "She's got this way of cutting straight to the heart of things." As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. Marcus spoke about his daughter with such obvious love, about the challenges of balancing fatherhood with running a company, about the loneliness that success couldn't fill. She shared her own dreams of the children's book she'd been writing in secret, her volunteer work at the animal shelter, her hope of someday opening a small bookstore. "You light up when you talk about that bookstore," Marcus observed as they shared dessert. "I haven't seen passion like that in a business meeting in years." "It's silly," Sarah said, looking down at her hands. "A woman like me, thinking she could run her own business." "A woman like you?" Marcus's voice sharpened slightly. "You mean a woman who's brilliant with numbers, who understands people, who has enough heart to care about everyone around her?" "That woman sounds exactly like someone who should run her own business." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like these, or as if her dreams were not just valid but inevitable. They were interrupted by a commotion at the restaurant's entrance. Sarah's co-workers from Meridian Marketing stumbled in, clearly having spent their evening at the bar across the street, ready to witness what they assumed would be her humiliation. Well, called out Rick Palmer, the office bully who'd orchestrated this entire setup. "How's your little date going, Sarah? Has Prince Charming run away yet?" The restaurant fell silent, all eyes turning to their table. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with shame, the magic of the evening shattering like glass. But Marcus simply stood up, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Actually," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a small velvet box that made the entire restaurant gasp, "I was just about to ask Sarah something very important." Sarah's heart stopped as Marcus dropped to one knee beside their table, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made the rest of the world fade away. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent restaurant, "I know this is crazy. I know we just met. But I also know that in 3 hours, you've shown me more kindness, more genuine humanity than I've experienced in 3 years. You've reminded me what it feels like to hope again." The velvet box opened to reveal a stunning diamond ring that caught the restaurant's lights and threw rainbows across the walls. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was doing. "I'm asking you to let me court you properly, to let me take you to meet Emma, to let me show you that someone does see you, really see you, and thinks you're absolutely extraordinary." The restaurant held its collective breath. Sarah could hear her coworkers' shocked whispers, could feel the weight of dozens of stares, but all she could focus on was the man kneeling before her with such hope in his eyes. "You don't have to answer now," Marcus said gently. "But I want everyone in this room to know that the woman they set up as a joke has just become the most important person in my world." Sarah looked around the room, at the faces filled with shock and awe, at her coworkers who'd orchestrated this evening as entertainment, at the strangers who'd become unwitting witnesses to something magical. Then she looked back at Marcus, this successful, powerful man who was kneeling before her not because he pitied her, but because he'd seen something in her worth treasuring. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." The restaurant erupted in applause as Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and swept her into his arms. Through the crowd's cheers and the flash of smartphone cameras, Sarah heard Rick Palmer's stunned voice, "What the hell just happened?" What had happened, Sarah realized as Marcus held her close, was that sometimes the universe conspires to turn the cruelest jokes into the most beautiful love stories. Sometimes being underestimated becomes your greatest strength. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to hope despite everything, that hope transforms not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. 6 months later, Sarah would walk down the aisle of a small chapel, with Emma Thompson as her flower girl and a congregation filled with people who'd learned to see beyond surfaces. The bookstore would open a year after that, with Marcus as her business partner and biggest supporter. But that night at Romano's, as they danced to the restaurant's piano music while their former tormentors watched in amazement, Sarah knew that the most important transformation had already taken place here, not in how others saw her, but in how she'd finally learned to see herself.